force gun that's also in the movie. Whenever they like do the click and shoot it and it throws people across the room, I want to play with that.
So these are all things that we'll see. The movie technology is all stuff we'll see within the show as well, too, even if we haven't seen it in the 20 minutes.
Yeah.
With the drone selfie, when talking to the consultants, is that something that could actually be happening in the near future?
There are people working on it. Drones that are that small exist. Drones that take pictures, obviously. The challenge apparently is like the landing and the takeoff from the wrist, but people are working on that.
Yeah.
It'll be here sooner than 2065.
Well, I know in the 20 minutes that we saw, there is another character that you guys are introducing, which is Dash's fraternal twin. You guys just announced the casting for that. If you want to reveal it here as well, that would be great.
We cast the amazing Nick Zander as Arthur, Dash's twin, and the fun there is really thinking about when they were in the milk bath, these three dogs were a hive mind essentially, and they saw the whole picture. But after pre-crime, they've now been separated and they've become very different people with very different gifts. And so Dash's sort of visual, like assault of images is very different from what Arthur gets, which is the names and the factual information about these murders. And it's easier to process, and so it makes him more manipulative, a little more like Sherlock Holmes, a little bit, but a bit more edge and a bit more of a sort of bad boy in the world. And so the fun of those two characters who both have this gift but use it in a very different way is something we're really looking forward to playing with.
But really, they're both just amateurs, because I get the whole picture. So.
Well, and it's interesting too, because the future is definitely addressed in the technology, but you guys are hitting on social issues as well as the first season goes on. Kevin, can you talk about kind of the future social issues that you're going to be hitting on?
Well, we'll get into those in a way that's organic to the story, but so many of the shows, we're living in, I guess, a technological, invasive society now anyway, and shows like Persons of Interest do that, and certainly the movie kicked all that off. We have to figure out ways to, and we want to figure out ways to use what's happening now and use the show 50 years as a prison to tell sort of stories like that. But we're chasing the best story, and if it's one that reflects on society, that's great. If it's one that's purely entertaining, that's great.
Well, for us, again, the fun of it is always really using the prism of the future as a way to think about today. In thematic social ways, and also just in selfie drones and things like that, because those comment on our world too. And what we hope to do is create a future that people want to live in and come back to week, and is fun, but is also engaging and interesting and has the same kind of groundedness and depth that the real world does. So there's that access point to the future.
Yeah. We have Agatha from the movie. Are there any other characters from the movie that we're going to be seeing in the show?
Yeah, and Daniel London, who played Wally, remember the caretaker and took care of the three cogs.
The one who brushes 13.
Brushes 13 and combs Agatha's hair luckily. He's joining
He's not still going to brush my teeth, is he?
That's the episode.
You gotta wait and watch. We've been needing to talk about that.
And then there's people that we would, certainly think about bringing back. Hello, Tom Cruise. That's something that may or may not happen.
Okay.
Stephen directs an episode.
Yeah, Stephen directs an episode. Absolutely.
Sweet.
Yeah, sweet.
Well, if you guys have any questions, we should start a line.
I have one little spoiler alert. You'll, and don't tell anybody this, but in the episode, the pilot, you will see evidence that The Simpsons is still on television, celebrating their 7th anniversary.
You guys have layered in a few Easter eggs into the pilot as well, too. Is there anything that we saw that we might...
Well, you should watch the show because it's awesome. And then when it's over, watch it again and just pause it because there's a lot of fun little stuff in there that we really get a kick out of.
Yeah, vacations in Tehran. And
that's right. The bus stops in Bartlett Plaza, named after those I led in my own television show, The West Wing. And so there's all the time that we put in. It's a blast. The show, we aim on having the show to it. So those moments are fun.
Great. Well, if you guys have any questions, you'll know exactly where you should be looking. middle, right?
Hi, good day. My name is Simon. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. Hi, Meagan.
Hi, Simon!
Meagan is an amazing person, let me tell you. She came to Trinidad a couple of years ago and worked at the orphanages down there. So, I mean, she's doing great work here as an actress. My question really is, it's an interesting group of casting choices and an amazing cast as well. And basically, in terms of Meagan and Wilmer, my question has to do with the fact that we are accustomed to seeing you in these comedic roles, you know, that you played throughout the years. I mean, that's not been your focus, but how is it now, you know, that you've gone into this role that is probably going to lean on other aspects of, you know, not drawing on the comedic side of it,
Right.
but yet, how do you plan to, you know, based on the character, still show that sort of flair that you guys have demonstrated, you know, other roles as well?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. You know, while the show definitely has, and I don't even want to say dramatic, but it just has this kind of real life aspect in this particular world of what's going on, there still are a lot of moments to just be, you know, funny, not intentionally, but because the moment is there and it exists, and there'll definitely be that where, you know, God willing, will make you laugh as well, but we also want to make you, you know, thrilled and afraid of what's going to happen, and, you know, fear of the character, and really care about what's going to happen with them. So I think we use a little bit of both, you know.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. I mean, I feel really blessed in the, long period of time that I've been doing this acting thing. I've been given the opportunity to stretch my muscle a little bit, to exercise muscles that most actors don't get the privilege to do. So sometimes when you do comedy, that's what you do. You do comedy. Sometimes when you do drama, that's what you do. You do drama, you know. And I've been very lucky that I've been given the opportunity to do both, you know, effortlessly throughout the years. But I do have to say that when the show, when the show deals with this type of stakes, the stakes are this high. You know, when the operation is this precise, and this thrilling, and this, you know, this serious, I think that there's also, you know, the human side that kicks in, which is sometimes you gotta have a little bit of a sense of humor with the case. You know, sometimes you have to have a little sense of humor with your partners, because that's why, because we actually love what we do as a lieutenant, as a detective. We're there because we have a hunger for the sport, and we enjoy playing together. And I think that also it's a little bit of that element that makes it, you know, allows us to be a little fun and funny and sarcastic. And it's important that you take the weight off. And I think that I'm not necessarily a big fan of when the scene is super serious, that you take it too serious, you know, because I think if those characters have been a lieutenant or a detective for a very long time, I'm pretty sure that by now, you know, they have some type of sense of humor about what they do on a daily basis, you know. And I think that makes the characters more human, because at the end of the day, the show is about the people that live in this very exotic, unique, and futuristic, and aspirational world. And to me, that's where the strength of the show is. You know, it's how do we bring those characters back to life? How do you believe? You know, how do you believe them? But I'm excited. I'm excited that I get to do that. And I'm really grateful, you know, of Kevin, Max, and Darryl, and Steven Spielberg, and you know, everyone, you know, and Justin, that can see us in this world and see us pay tribute to it, and hopefully you guys feel the same way.
For the producers, are you guys looking for actors with comedic backgrounds to kind of fit into this world for the reasons that Wilmer said?
You know, it's all about that balance. And we were looking for the best actors to play these roles, and we got so lucky in finding people who have that balance between being able to be serious and be charming and engaging, characters that you're going to want to come back to. You know, we looked out.
Yeah, we did. And we write to the humor. The show is funny in the right places and at the right times. But we really emphasize that. We like to have the wit, and those guys all deliver very well.
Excellent, thank you. Next question.
Hi. First, I just gotta say that.
You look great, man.
So anyway, first I just gotta say that Wilmer, you make me laugh every day on Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of us kind of did a little bit of like, let's revisit the film, even though we love it so much. Let's really study the science, the world, you know, the dynamic, the energy of that room, you know. But we also were excited to bring, you know, what does that world look like 10 years after pre-crime was abolished? You know, I think that was exciting to us, and I think, you know, you guys can speak a little bit on that too. But I think we bring a little bit more light to this world. It's not as gloomy or as you know, as dark as the future sometimes tends to be played out in movies and in other projects, you know. But I think we try to figure out that maybe the world is not going to be terrible, you know. Maybe there's just crime, but we continue to live on, you know. There's one background on that.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have source material that's so rich, you know, it actually started with a short story by Philip K. Dick, you know, which is there's a lot of stuff to dig into, but I also think it's important, like Wilmer said, to explore it for ourselves and find out what it is and make it new and make it fresh.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question. You look great, but.
Hello. Hi. I'm Sharon. I want to say first, Wilmer, in that 70s show, I absolutely loved you. And having done a show in the past and now working in the present, question for the whole panel. If you could choose a time period from the past or the future to live in, which would you choose?
Oh, I'm going to start. I choose the past. I choose that kind of like 30s, 40s, sort of that you see in the sort of film noir kind of, maybe even in LA, like that kind of LA Confidential sort of world. That's where I live.
Well, I already lived the 70s. Let's skip those. But I like that era as well, and I think that when you see my character on Minority, I think you get to see that I try to be a little retro with the way I dressed, you know, because I kind of my homage to, you know, how my great-grandparents maybe used to, you know, dress.
What do you mean retro, like 2045? Like 2045? Is that retro?
No, I'm going way back.
Everything that's old becomes new again.
Right.
But the future looks pretty awesome. So maybe 2065 might be the year that I'd like to focus on.
I'm looking forward to the future, but I definitely love the 80s. I was born in the 80s. But I wish I was like 20 in the 80s, and then I could still be 20 now. I wish I was like 20 in the 80s, but it just seemed like such a fun time, and such a free time, and such a evolved point before we get too evolved to think about it too much. It's kind of that great in between. So that's why that's it.
When I grew up, I was obsessed with King Arthur and the medieval times. I wanted to be a knight, you know, I wanted to live back in those days and ride horses and save maidens and things. And then the more I learned about the actual conditions that those people lived in, I decided maybe that would not be a great idea. So I would live in that time if it was like my imagination.
That's a great question. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Star, and my question is for Max and the producers. You touched on it earlier when you mentioned the selfie drones and how you depict technology on the show. My question is, how do you find a balance between showing technology or special effects that is distracting and tech that's necessary in telling the story?
Well, that is a real challenge in the fun of it. It's a great question, we really try to have the story drive everything. And in a show like this, when you're setting it, 50 years from now, you have to think about every scene in a way you don't normally. If you in a normal show, you say, "Oh, those two people are sitting in a car and they're talking." Okay, great. Wait a minute, we have to have a car. What's that car going to be? Is there a driver, or is there not a driver? And so we try to lean into technology that has a point, where there's something fun, it's talking about the world, and you watch it and you go, that's kind of funny, that's interesting, I didn't think that would happen. And we challenge ourselves all the time to pick those places and pick those spots to really showcase it, and that way it doesn't overtake the characters, but it becomes hopefully this added element that's just almost another character in the show.
Hi, my name is Gabby. I'm from Puerto Rico. And first I want to say amazing. I'm super excited for the show. My question is for Laura and Stark. Since you play such secluded characters, what mindset or what kind of process do you use to prepare for such a role?
That's a great question. And it's funny because I don't think we've ever talked to each other about that, really, at all. But I kind of came at the character that she had sort of an otherworldly feeling. And I couldn't really put my finger on her. She's not an alien. She's a human person, but she hasn't had any of the normal experiences that we all have. She's never functioned in society before. She's never had friends. You know, she has these two stepbrothers. So, I mean, I can't give away all my secrets, but I feel like I sort of started with an image of her being sort of like very like tall and like something ruling her that's up here. I don't know, like not sort of grounded. Sometimes you hear about people who are very grounded and solid and normal, but that she was sort of different, maybe. That's one place I started with, but what about you?
Yeah, that's actually the very first thing that I spent time thinking about when I got the part, or when I was auditioning for the part, because it's one thing to play somebody who has this superpower and you can see the future, but it's a whole other thing when that person has never really interacted with human beings other than these two people he grew up with. So I spent a lot of time thinking about isolation. I spent a lot of time, like, I have a wife, and I spent a little time up in the Catskills not talking, which was not very kind to her, but I wanted to know what it felt like. I live in New York City, and it's like, you don't have isolation there. You do a lot of mental homework getting ready for anything. This was a very multi-layered experience, just trying to imagine that layer on top of all the other stuff. And it's complicated, and it's ongoing. We're still in the early stages of making the show, so we'll spend a lot more time thinking about that.
Did both of you actually go into like an isolation chamber?
Great call. Yeah, Laura, you did it first, didn't you? Or did I do it first?
Yes.
No. Oh, that's right. Have you heard of these float tanks where you float in a tank? You pay money. It's like almost like going to a massage parlor or a tanning booth, but instead it's this white tank that's it's like the milk bath, and it's for
sounds like a spa.
It's like a spa. But it's blackness, you can't hear anything, you can't see anything. You have earplugs in and you're floating in salt water, so that you're actually, you're not touching the walls, you're not touching the ground, and within a few minutes, because the water is the same temperature as the human body, you don't even feel the water anymore. And that was interesting. Thank you for reminding me about that, Max. Just to sort of know what it felt like to float around in the milk bath and be left with only your own thoughts.
Laura, did you have any contact with Samantha Morton about this character?
No, none at all. I mean, I revere her. She's an astonishingly talented actress. It's quite daunting, actually, to take over this role from her. Scary, daunting, all of those things. But I'm really just working with the mythology that's set up for the character, and it's so rich. It's great to just sink my teeth into it in my own way. I really can't. You can't copy someone. You just have to take the reins in them.
It's like doing a Broadway show where you take over for somebody else, and you don't just want to emulate what they did, you gotta make it your own.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Archie. Thank you all for doing this panel. My question is for Max. What are the differences or challenges between writing for film and TV? And thank you so much for Godzilla. I can't wait for the next one.
Well, thanks. And me too. I'm excited about it. This is my first experience in television, and it's amazing. Really, the thing that I think is really the big difference is that as a style of storytelling, you really have to think about the long game in a way that in a movie you have maybe 2 hours to tell that story, and that's sort of what all that energy goes into. And we put a lot of energy into the pilot, but the whole thing that we spend our time thinking about is what is this sort of story going to be like?